You're listening to an African Elements top news story for April 11th, 2025. Please visit our website at africanelements.org for more daily news. Zimbabwe Farmer Compensation Updates, 2025, News and Amounts, by Darius Spearman, African Elements. Zimbabwe has started making compensation payments to white farmers. This comes 25 years after land seizures under Robert Mugabe's government. For many in the African diaspora, this news brings up complex feelings. It touches on the legacy of colonialism, the fight for land justice, and the current economic realities facing the nation. Consequently, the move has sparked considerable debate both inside and outside Zimbabwe. The government initiated these payments as part of a broader effort. President Emerson Mnangagwa's administration aims to mend relations with the international community. Understanding the details requires looking at the numbers, the history, and the motivations behind this decision. Furthermore, we must consider how this impacts the black families who received the land but often struggle. The Zimbabwean government began dispersing funds in April 2025. An initial amount of $3.1 million started reaching farmers. This payment represents only 1% of the total claims for the approved batch of farms. Specifically, 378 farms out of 740 approved claims are covered in this first phase. For this particular group of farmers, the total compensation owed amounts to $311 million. The remaining 99% will be paid using US dollar-denominated treasury bonds. This bond structure aims to provide stable value compared to Zimbabwe's often volatile local currency. Nevertheless, given the country's economic instability and history of hyperinflation, the practicality and reliability of these bonds remain a concern. These payments are part of a much larger $3.5 billion compensation agreement. This agreement was signed back in 2020. It's crucial to note that this compensation is specifically for infrastructure improvements made on the farms. These include buildings, dams, and irrigation systems. Importantly, the agreement does not cover the value of the land itself, which remains a contentious issue. Foreign farmers from Europe received priority earlier. About $20 million was paid in February 2025 to those protected under bilateral investment agreements. This prioritization likely stems from geopolitical pressures and existing treaties. To grasp the current situation, we must look back at Zimbabwe's history. The land issue didn't begin with Mugabe. It has deep roots in British colonial policies. These policies systematically seized the most fertile land from indigenous populations. Consequently, a small white minority controlled vast tracts of prime agricultural land. By the time Zimbabwe gained independence in 1980, the imbalance was stark. Around 4,000 white farmers owned most of the best arable land. Pre-independence, less than 1% of the population, mostly white settlers, owned 70% of the fertile land. Meanwhile, the black majority was largely confined to less productive communal areas. Early post-independence land reform efforts moved slowly. They were hampered by inefficiency, corruption, and constraints like the Lancaster House Agreement. Indeed, these constraints expired in the 1990s, removing some legal barriers to redistribution. The situation escalated dramatically in 2000. After losing a constitutional referendum that year, Robert Mugabe initiated the Fast-Track Land Reform Program. This program aimed to accelerate the redistribution of land from white farmers to black Zimbabweans. However, the process quickly became chaotic and violent. Supporters of Mugabe's ZANU-PF party and veterans of the Liberation War led often violent takeovers. Around 3,000 white-owned farms were seized. Officially, the goal was to correct historical imbalances. In practice, the seizures often bypassed legal procedures and favored political allies. Ultimately, about 300,000 black families were resettled onto approximately 10.8 million hectares of former white-owned farmland. Yet, this rapid, often forced, redistribution created immense disruption. While land redistribution addressed a key historical grievance, the outcomes for many resettled black families were challenging. The fast-track program resettled around 300,000 families. However, many new farmers lacked the necessary farming skills, capital, and access to loans. They also inherited farms where infrastructure might have been damaged or neglected during the transition. The disruption led to a dramatic collapse in agricultural productivity. Food production declined by as much as 60% in the years following the seizures. Zimbabwe, once considered a breadbasket for southern Africa, became reliant on foreign aid and maize imports to feed its population. Thus, the socio-economic gains hoped for through land reform were often negated by these severe challenges faced by the new farmers. President Mnangagwa's government, which came to power after Mugabe, is actively seeking international re-engagement. The land seizures and associated human rights concerns led to significant sanctions from the United States and the European Union. These sanctions have hampered Zimbabwe's economy for decades. Paying compensation is seen as a step towards normalizing relations and lifting these sanctions. It signals a potential commitment to property rights and the rule of law, aiming to attract foreign investment. Furthermore, Mnangagwa has made overtures like pledging zero tariffs for U.S. imports, potentially aligning with certain foreign policy interests to rebuild trust. The prioritization of foreign farmers, protected by bilateral agreements with countries like Germany and Switzerland, also underscores the government's focus on stabilizing international relations and courting investors. The 2020 agreement sets the framework for the current $3.5 billion compensation plan. It is vital to reiterate that this compensation is strictly for improvements made on the land, such as buildings and irrigation systems, not for the land itself. This distinction avoids reopening the deeply complex issue of original land ownership while attempting to address the losses incurred by the displaced farmers. Interestingly, the response from the displaced farmers has not been unanimous. Only about 540 of the more than 4,000 farmers affected reportedly signed the compensation agreement. Sources suggest many farmers still retain the original title deeds to their land. However, the legal status of these deeds in light of the seizures and resettlement remains unclear from the available information. Funding the massive $3.5 billion obligation is another major hurdle. Besides the initial small cash payments, the government relies heavily on issuing U.S. dollar-denominated treasury bonds and potentially leveraging foreign deals, like the tariff concessions offered to the U.S. Certainly, the long-term feasibility of this funding plan in Zimbabwe's strained economy is questionable. The compensation of white farmers in Zimbabwe is a story with deep historical roots and significant present-day implications. From a diaspora perspective, it highlights the enduring legacy of colonial land theft and the ongoing struggle for economic justice in post-colonial Africa. While the Mnangagwa government frames this as a necessary step for international re-engagement and economic recovery, it occurs against a backdrop where many black farmers who received land face immense difficulties. Ultimately, balancing historical redress, current economic needs, and international pressure remains a profound challenge for Zimbabwe. Copyright African Elements.